Hello, everybody, and welcome to your political landscape show of this Wednesday, 25th of October, 2023. Last week, Professor Chossudovsky brought up some facts proving that we are in front of a false flag in Israel. And this week, he wanted to talk about the underlying reason of what is going on, what underlying these attacks. He is talking about wiping Gaza for big money agenda. So let's listen what he has to say today. Hello.
Yes, hello. Delighted to be on the program again. We're dealing with very complex issues. And I think there's the need also with regard, let's say, to the false flag, to understand that this false flag has been ongoing for at least 20 years. It's part of a strategy of Israel's intelligence services. I won't get into that, but in the year 2000, they defined what was called justified vengeance. It was a concept, it was an operation. And justified vengeance was based on the notion that suicide attacks and attacks directed at civilians would be the pretext for major military operations directed against Palestine. Now, today what I want to focus on is the following, and it's something on which there's absolutely no media coverage. I'm an economist, and I can say that from the entire history of humanity, there's not a single war which does not have an economic dimension. The wars are not there. We might talk about wars of religion, etc., but behind every single war in the history of humanity, there's an economic objective, which is acquire territorial control over the resources of an enemy country. Okay? And there is something very specific in relation to the ongoing operation, which we have called wiping Gaza off the map, and which is characterized by a criminal undertaking on the part of Israel, in the sense that they're saying, no, we're not, you can't have electricity, you can't have water, you can't have food, we're going to block everything. And then they're pushing about 1 million people towards the border with Egypt, and in the hope that they might be able to cross the border and leave their homeland. So it's very clear that the objective is there to exclude Palestinians from their homeland. But there's another objective, which is fundamental. It's a big money agenda, because the Gaza Strip is not a poor territory in a poor country, quite the opposite. It has a very important wealth of maritime natural gas, which are, in other words, it's the maritime offshore gas reserves. They're worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. Okay? And what really Israel wants is to acquire those maritime gas resources, which belong to which belong to Palestine. They want to confiscate them. That is absolutely clear, that the wiping of Gaza off the map is an avenue to confiscating all Gaza's maritime offshore gas reserves, which are worth billions and billions of dollars. Now, I should mention, before proceeding, There are two, essentially, in 1999, British Gas discovered very important resources of maritime gas, which belong to Palestine. At one point, Israel tried to appropriate them and even went to the Supreme Court, but they belong to Palestine. But Israel has done everything in its power to prevent the Palestinians from actually exploiting these reserves, which would entail contracts with British Petroleum or others. I'm sorry, British Gas or others. In other words, but it would be their project, and Israel has always blocked that. And their objective, right from the beginning, in the last 20 years, is to appropriate those reserves of natural gas, which are in the maritime territorial waters, not only of Palestine, but also of Lebanon and also of Syria. So if you look at the map, you'll see an extensive area. It's called the Levant Basin area, and it extends. In fact, that map may be quite incomplete. It depends what map you're looking at, but it extends from the border with Egypt all the way up to northern Syria. And what Israel wants to do is to appropriate those maritime gas reserves, and for that they have to essentially want to do it by through an outright military occupation of Gaza and by the expulsion of Palestinians from their homeland. Okay, now this is the background, but there are certain complexities there, and there's certain secret negotiations which are ongoing, particularly with Egypt.
Yes, I was about to ask you about these secret bilateral agreements between Egypt and Israel.
Well, Egypt, in a sense, is complicit, and certainly Egypt is not in any way supportive of the rights of Palestinians, because in the year 2021, Egypt and Israel were involved in secret bilateral talks, and this has been corroborated by several press reports concerning the extradition of natural gas from the coastline of the Gaza Strip, the maritime wealth in natural gas. And I should mention there are essentially two discoveries. One was by British Gas in the year 2000 or 1999, and then there was another one which was discovered in 2013. It's more recent, but that was the Levant discoveries. Now, the secret bilateral talks is, of course, Egypt also has an interest, because they have a border with these maritime gas reserves, and what they have in mind is that they will share the confiscation of these gas reserves with Israel, and I mean, the press reports say that they actually acknowledge that they were secret bilateral talks, but we don't really know. We don't have the details on that. But what is significant is that there was, and that was about a couple of years. No, I'm sorry. It was last year. It's about a year ago. There was a report, a press report in the Middle East, which then confirmed that Egyptian intelligence was involved in negotiations with, I presume, with their counterparts, which is Mossad, or, well, it's the military intelligence group of Israel. There's several components to it. And what they had envisaged was, I quote, an Egyptian economic and security delegation was set up to discuss with Israel the issue of allowing the extraction of natural gas off the coast of Gaza, and that would be a joint project between Egypt and Israel. Now, I should mention that the Palestinian National Authority was provided its rubber stamp to this memorandum of understanding between Egypt and Israel. I suspect that's Mahmoud Abbas, who is an absolute traitor. But again, the government in the Gaza Strip was not consulted. It was taken against they probably know about this secret agreement because I read it in the Middle East press. But the thing is that this memorandum of understanding between Egypt and Israel, rubber stamped by the Palestinian National Authority, is of course crucial because for two reasons. The Israelis waging this criminal attack on the Gaza Strip, literally leading people into starvation. They may require at one point the collaboration of Egypt to establish refugee camps on the periphery of the territory of the Gaza Strip, in other words, in Egyptian territory. And that may be part of the negotiation strategy of Israel, that they would say, well, okay, you collaborate with us on the exploitation of gas, and we will give you some favors in return, but you facilitate the exodus of Palestinians from their homeland. And I suspect that there may be a component to that, to that objective. And of course, Egypt is also interested in exploiting the natural gas, which is contiguous to its territorial waters, because that extends from it extends right up from the border with Egypt right up to northern Syria. So the thing is that now all these secret agreements have an ultimate motive, and the memorandum of understanding was signed between Egypt and Israel. It was rubber stamped by Mahmoud Abbas, who I think is simply there and has been well, I don't think he was blackmailed. I think they gave him some money to shut his mouth and to accept this kind of arrangement. What this agreement requires is that the extraction of natural gas off the coast of Gaza as part of the memorandum would start in early 2024. They actually set a date. Now, I said, in other words, I'll read you the extract. The Egyptian Economic and Security Delegation discussed with Israel for several months the issue of allowing the extraction of natural gas off the coast of Gaza starting in early 2024. Okay, so they said that was the timeline. The timeline was of the secret negotiations would be that we would start confiscating Palestine's offshore maritime gas reserves beginning, quote, I'm quoting, beginning of 2024. Now, beginning of 2024 is in a few months from now. And in other words, they have a timeline. The timeline, October 7th, was the beginning of the false flag. I won't get into that, but it was the pretext and the justification to wage a genocidal war against people of the Gaza Strip, 2.3 million people, and literally bomb their hospitals, their schools, drive them 1 million people towards the border with Egypt. And then they say, oh, we're going to start confiscating your maritime natural gas reserves, beginning before the beginning of 2024. So I think people who are involved in the peace movement, people who are in solidarity with Palestine, must, in essence, bring this issue of the maritime natural gas revenues, resources into the picture. And they also pertain to Lebanon and Syria. So it's not accidental that already now that Israel is bombing northern Syria, for instance, and is also bombing Lebanon. Their objective is to gain control over an entire border, to acquire the maritime rights of those of those gas reserves right up to the Turkish border, and they will start. Of course, they will start with Gaza, and Gaza's wealth is, in terms of maritime natural gas, is tremendous. And that is the economic objective, the big money objective behind these attacks, which commenced a few hours after the announcement of Hamas's attack on Israel. There we are. So my suggestion is, first of all, we have to stand in solidarity with Palestine. We must understand that Israel is not being attacked by Palestine. It has waged a war against Palestine for virtually more than half a century. And I should mention, and I can conclude on that, is that this Hamas-Mossad partnership, which has led to a false flag agenda, goes back at least 20 years, and following the failure of the Oslo 1 and 2 negotiations, in other words, the two-state solution, and the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, that was in 1995, they coined an operation, and that was in 2001, Operation Justified Vengeance. And that is the whole basis of the false flag. And they encouraged the suicide attacks, which were waged in Israel by members of the Palestinian resistance, and that in turn provided them this notion of Operation Justified Vengeance is there essentially to justify, to present the Palestinians as those who are waging war on Israel. So there's a long history on that. And I think what is really important is first to understand that history, to understand the struggle of, the struggle which has been waged by the people of Palestine right from the beginning in 1945. I'm sorry, in 1948, and how, in fact, today there is the notion of what was called Nakba, which was the exclusion of Palestinians from their homeland, which was in 1948. And now what the leadership is saying, we need a 1948 style solution, which means essentially that's, I'm coining the words of Ariel Sharon, but that has been picked up by the leading, by successive Israeli governments for more than 20 years. And in turn, Israel has been supporting Hamas, at least the Islamic, because it has Islamic roots, and there is a partnership. Of course, that's at the level of covert intelligence operations. And I would distinguish between those operations and what actually happened. But certainly the whole basis of justified vengeance was to legitimize the destruction of Palestine, and that's all in documents which have been revealed. And then, of course, there was the assassination of Yasser Arafat, and so on and so forth. It's a complex history. But what is now important for the peace movement to address is the fact that we have to ensure that not only Palestinians are not excluded from their homeland, but that they have the authority to develop, and their maritime reserves in natural gas, which belong to Palestine, which belong to the people of Palestine. And that, of course, is certainly part of the agenda that Netanyahu wants to confiscate those reserves once and for all, and initiate that in a few months from now, at the beginning of 2024.
Thank you for this rich analysis and your recommendation for this week on what is going on. And I would like to thank all the auditors, and also would like to invite you to follow globalresearch.ca. Thank you.